Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, family, and everybody else, such a great pleasure to be with you today on the latest edition of Season 4 of Real Talk with Billy and Cory, live from our homes at Zoom University. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hot Take Billy Parvatam on hand, joined by my podcast partner, Uncle Cornelius Michael. A lot of people call him Cory Van Dyke. Uncle, it's great to be back with you for another edition of the podcast early in the morning as we record this, currently 9:03 a.m.
Yeah, recording it early. We wanted to get it out before the MLB playoffs started today. So up bright and early to record this, and always look forward to talking sports with my main man, Billy.
Yes, sir. And what an exciting time it is in sports. Obviously, we're in this situation because of the pandemic, but think about all the exciting things we have going on right now. The MLB playoffs start today. The NBA finals start tomorrow. We're right in the middle of the NFL and college football seasons. But today we've got a lot of exciting things to talk about. So let's start off with it, Cory. The MLB playoffs start today. Amazingly, we finished the season with everything going on in this country and around the world. Yet, with the exception of a few outbreaks at the beginning of the season, baseball was able to finish the season. Now we head to the playoffs where they will play in a bubble, much like the NBA has done for their playoffs in Arlington, Texas. They'll play all of their postseason games. But before we get to talking about the postseason explicitly, Cory, what were your overall thoughts on the season? Again, a lot of unknowns going in, yet we were able to finish it for the most part clean with a few hiccups, and here we are at the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, my main impression is just how, kind of like you said, that we were able to get, the full 60 games in for, I think, pretty much almost every team. I don't think the Cardinals got full 60 in, but they had already clinched the spot in the playoffs by the time. So, yeah, it kind of went off, without too many bumps along the way. We were able to get that, like I said, those full 60 games. And it didn't really feel all that different. I mean, yes, there's no fans there. Yes, there's new rules involved and stuff like that. But it was still America's pastime. It was still good old baseball that you could turn on the TV and watch. So that's what my kind of main takeaway was. I was rooting for my Giants at the end of it. They fell one game short of making it and probably would have got smacked by the Dodgers in the first round. But hey, I mean, it was a great season to follow along to as a Giants fan. Great season to see some of these other teams kind of rise up, and I'm sure teams we'll discuss a little later on. But just see just the overall season come together. And now, I think me and you have always said MLB playoffs is perhaps our favorite playoffs. It might have a different feel this year with the no fans. I know the fans kind of make it what it really is in the MLB playoffs. So I'm interested to see what the dynamics of that looks like. But nonetheless, still excited for the playoffs to start today.
Yeah, shout out to the Nationals finishing last place in the NL East. But honestly, can't complain. They won the World Series last year, so you knew the season was going to be tough anyway to repeat. But shout out to Juan Soto, who won the batting title, Trey Turner, among the league leaders in hits. What were your thoughts on some of the rules now that we had a chance to watch the season play out? I mean, we had, again, among other things, the DH in the National League. We had the extra innings rule. We had the minimum 3 batter rule for pitchers that come in. What were your thoughts on some of those rules that we saw play out, and do you see any of them potentially becoming permanent as we move forward?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I personally I talked about it before. It was a little controversial, but I was a fan of the extra inning rule. Put a guy on second base and let it play out from there. I think it did speed the game up a little bit. It did, and kind of get these guys in situations where strategy becomes involved. And honestly, I think we had talked about it a little bit. I was surprised just how many teams didn't score in those situations. You'd get a guy on second with no outs, and there would be sometimes 2-3 innings a row of neither team scoring, which was awfully surprising to me. So I don't know. I liked that rule. I liked just the intrigue that it had, and just putting a pitcher straight in a pressurized situation like that. I mean, obviously the DH rule, it provided more offense. I feel like NL pitchers didn't have an opportunity to just cruise through a lineup at the end and say, oh, I can walk this guy because the pitcher's up next or anything like that. So I could certainly see that rule sticking around, and I think it probably will.
I agree with you. I thought the extra inning rule gave a lot more strategy than we initially gave it credit for, because I think a lot of it depends on where you're at in your lineup. If you're on the road, are you playing for 2 runs or more? I thought that the extra innings rule added excitement to the game. I do like the fact, though, that for the postseason, they're going back to like it's just a regular inning. You've got to play it out until someone wins organically. And then I agree with you. I love the DH rule. I think it's going to stay. The fact is that I think even as National League fans, we kind of got tired at the end of the lineup, with pitchers being automatic outs. I also think with, big name pitchers like Max Scherzer getting paid what they get, I think it's going to be hard to, make the case that these guys who are such big investments for their teams keep hitting when there's so much risk involved. We obviously remember Max Scherzer last year getting hit by a ball in batting practice. So I do think the DH rule is here to stay. I know Cory, you said you don't necessarily remember all of your predictions from the season, but based on the teams that made it, any surprises? I know looking at my original predictions in the AL, I think I was pretty almost accurate. I had the Yankees and the Rays making the playoffs, the Astros, the Twins. The NL was a little bit different of a story, especially with the Nationals winning the division. But for the most part, I think we had some teams that we expected to be in the mix and some teams that, interestingly enough, were able to make it to the playoffs, like the Marlins. I know you were a big Rays guy, and here we are, end of the season. They're the number 1 seed. What's your thoughts on the overall playoff bracket?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I remember talking back about it. I said there's going to be, with those 1 or 2 teams that just seemingly come out of nowhere that we don't even mention in our prediction. I think the one team that jumps out is the Marlins, obviously. Credit to Don Mattingly and the job that he did with that team, especially with an outbreak in their organization early on, and just how he was able to guide them to a second place finish in that NL East where, I think we both had the Nationals, and I think we might have both had the Mets as well.
Yep.
For a third wild card. So, the fact that we had 2 teams like that in our predictions, and the Marlins jumped them both. The Phillies were also a team that certainly could have contended, and they did contend at the end and kind of choked a little bit down the stretch with a spot in their grasp. But congrats to the Marlins getting through. I think another kind of big story is just the Padres. I think we both had predicted them to win the NL or to be the second place finisher in the NL West. But just the fact that I think they clearly looked like maybe you can probably make it to the Braves since they did technically finish as the second seed. But I think the Padres were the second best team in the NL this year. Just the lineup that they had of Machado, Tatis, and Hosmer and guys like that, and starting pitching that they were able to get. There is a little bit of a question mark there. Cy Young candidate Dinelson Lamet. He exited his last start against the Giants with a bicep injury, so I don't know the full story on that yet. But I think the Padres kind of really took that step forward to be a World Series contender even this year.
So as we look to the playoffs, just a reminder for everybody, 8 teams from each league. They expanded it for the purposes of this shortened season. The top 2 teams from each division plus the teams from each league with the next 2 best records. The wild card series will be a best of 3 series, while the division series, league championship series, and the World Series will be their normal lengths, best of 7. So a lot of exciting things happening, especially in this wild card round. Let's put our money where our mouth is, make our predictions. We have first Tampa and Toronto at the 1 versus 8 matchup. 4-5 is going to be a really interesting matchup, Cleveland and the Yankees. We have the Twins and the Astros. And we have the White Sox and the Athletics. So let's start with Tampa and Toronto. Cory, I would be shocked if you picked something different. And for the record, before the season started, I predicted the Dodgers-Yankees. Cory predicted the Dodgers-Rays, I believe. Mm-hmm. So based off of that, are you changing your pick, Cory? Or are you sticking with the Rays here for this first 1-8 matchup?
I'm sticking with my guns. I'm going to pick the Rays over kind of an upstart, Blue Jays team. That's another team we could have mentioned that really kind of took a step forward with that young talent that they do have. But I think the Rays are a better team kind of in every aspect of the game. So I'm going to pick the Rays going forward in that one.
I agree with you. I think the Rays are the better team. Blake Snell, I think, is going to be a integral part. Charlie Morton, I think, in this wild card series, best 2 out of 3. Whoever's got the stronger pitchers. Really in the postseason, I think it's overall an advantage, but especially when you only need to win 2 out of 3, whoever has a stronger starting pitching staff, I think, has the edge. I'm going with the Rays. This is going to be a really interesting matchup right here. Cleveland and the Yankees. The Yankees, of course, were my pick early on to make it out of the American League. I know you had them in the playoffs as well. So what do you think about this series?
Yeah, man, I think this is the series I have circled for all the matchups in this this wild card round. You look even at the matchup today, Garrett Cole and Mr. Bieber on Shane Bieber on the other side. It's, two of the top arms in the game. Bieber's likely going to be the AL Cy Young. So you look at that matchup even just right off the bat, and that's because this is only a best of 3, so you only need to win 2 games. So whichever starting pitcher comes out and wins that one, you ought to think that puts themselves in a good position. But that being said, I do like Bieber more than Cole, but I do like the Yankees more than the Indians. I'm going to take the Yankees going forward. I think they finally have some of their bats healthy with Judge and Stanton back in the lineup, so I'm going to go with the Yanks moving forward.
This was a very tough series for me because I, on one hand, picked the Yankees to make it out of the American League before the season started, but on the other hand, I really love what the Indians have been able to do. I'm going to stick with the Yankees because I think they are the overall better team, but I would love to see the Indians advance because people forget that 2016 World Series, that was a classic with the Cubs. People like, the Cubs hadn't won since 1908. The Indians haven't won a World Series since 1948, so I'm always a big fan of watching those long curses, so to speak, end. So I'd love to see the Indians potentially win it all, but I think for right now the Yankees have the better team. But that being said, I am openly rooting for the Indians. So I'll pick the Yankees. I'll stick with them, but I would not be mad if the Indians end up winning that series. So far, agreement on Tampa and New York. It looks like according to us, we'll see an AL East Division Series matchup. Let's look at the other side of the American League bracket. We have Minnesota and we have Houston, first year under Dusty Baker, still doing what they do, making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I know the Twins have to be thrilled that they're not facing the Yankees in the first round, as it seemingly is every year, and they get eliminated by them. So, but they had a great year, obviously. The addition of Kenta Maeda to their staff, he's really become their ace, honestly, in a way. And they've looked strong. I'm going to pick the Twins going forward. The Astros just haven't looked like the normal Astros self this year.
This is going to be a tough matchup because, for example, the Astros lost Justin Verlander for, honestly, an extended period of time. Who knows when he'll be back. But I am picking the Houston Astros to upset this series. I think they have the experience when it comes to the postseason. Okay, they don't have the garbage cans, but for the most part, they've still got a talented team. And I also acknowledge I am openly rooting for Dusty Baker. He is, I think, one of the best managers in the game. You look at every team he's gone to, he's had success. I actually thought he shouldn't have gotten fired from the Nationals, and now obviously Dave Martinez stepped in and won the World Series. But there was an argument that he shouldn't have been fired the way the Nats were playing immediately after he was let go. So I think the Astros have enough talent to potentially beat the Twins. We'll see if it can help them carry forward throughout the rest of the playoffs. But I will pick the Astros to upset the Twins. So there's our first disagreement right there. And then you move to the last AL matchup. I think this is going to be a really interesting series, Oakland and the White Sox.
Yeah, Oakland is that team that, you don't hear about them a lot, but they just seem to win and win and win. But I think it is also a different dynamic in the playoffs where I think we can both kind of agree where pitching matters more in the playoffs. And you look at Oakland's rotation, nothing really sticks out about them. So that's why I'm going to go with my first upset, the Chicago White Sox, to beat the Oakland A's in this one. I think the White Sox, with Lucas Giolito, with Dallas Keuchel at the top of the rotation, guys like Tim Anderson, I think one of the most underrated stars in the game. Jose Abreu was close to leading the league in home runs this year. I think that the combination of that lineup and that pitching staff will get it done in this shortened series.
And I am going to agree with you. I'm going to pick the White Sox to upset the A's. The A's are always an intriguing team, as you mentioned, because it's like every year we think, is Moneyball actually going to work? I mean, obviously we've all seen the movie, and we've seen the A's under Bob Melvin make the playoffs several times, but they really haven't even been able to advance to the League Championship Series. But like you said, I love the White Sox dynamic. Lucas Giolito, a former National. People forget he was in that Adam Eaton trade that sent Adam Eaton to the Nationals. I think Lucas Giolito is a better player. Obviously, position and pitcher, it's hard to compare. I think Lucas Giolito has more value, but no question, Adam Eaton helped the Nats win the World Series. So I think it's a win-win, but I definitely like Giolito and the White Sox, and I'm with you. I love Tim Anderson. I think he's a rising star in the game. So I agree with you. I think the White Sox will upset the A's. So for the most part, pretty much same agreement between me and Cory. We both had Tampa. We both had the Yankees. We both have the White Sox. We'll see with the Minnesota-Houston series. I have Houston. He has Minnesota. I think Minnesota will be a formidable opponent. So we shall see what happens. But let's now move on to the uh, National League, our first series, a rematch of the NLCS 2 years ago, the Dodgers and the Brewers. Corey, what's your thoughts on that series?
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, the Brewers, they didn't impress me at all really this year. They were kind of lucky, honestly, to sneak in at the last bit where, if some of those teams had won that final day, they would have been in. But all the teams that needed to win lost, and the Brewers were able to sneak in. Christian Yelich didn't have nearly the type of season that he's had in the past as an MVP candidate. So I'm going to pick the Dodgers, kind of the safe pick there, the team that, has looked the best all year long in the NL.
Dodgers were my World Series pick. I'm not going to go against them now. I'm picking the Dodgers pretty easy for me. I think this is going to be a really intriguing series, maybe the best one in the National League. San Diego and St. Louis. Corey, you mentioned San Diego's got those big bats in Machado and Tatis Jr., and you've got St. Louis, a veteran team that's looking to make another deep postseason run. What's your thoughts on the series?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think you have it right. It's potentially the biggest, most intriguing series in the NL. And the way I talked up the Padres, I can't pick against them. I'm going to pick San Diego to advance in that one.
I agree with you. I'm going with San Diego. I think this is going to be an interesting changing of the guard series. You look at the Cardinals; they're an older team. Guys like Yadier Molina, Adam Wainwright. I mean, you think about it, guys who have really established themselves as, and I think, by the way, those two guys are Hall of Famers. And then you've got this young upstart team in San Diego and with its young stars. But I really like how far what their potential is, and I think it is a type of changing of the guard series where we sort of pass the mantle along to some of these younger, more star-studded teams. I am going with the Padres to beat the Cardinals. So again, so far agreement on this series. Let's now move on to the Cubs and the Marlins. I think it's an interesting series, Corey, because people forget with the Steve Bartman incident, that was against the Marlins back in 2003. He prevents Moises Alou from catching the foul ball, and Marlins end up coming back down 3-1, win the World Series that year. In fact, this is the first time they've made the playoffs since their 2003 World Series championship run. But that historical perspective aside, what's your thoughts on this series?
Yeah, and that's perhaps my favorite 30 for 30 episode as well, that episode on Steve Bartman. But yeah, I mean, I think you look at this series, the Marlins, obviously, like I said earlier, the surprise team of the playoffs. As much as Don Mattingly has impressed me this year, it's going to be hard for me to pick them against a veteran-laden Cubs team that has the postseason experience. I'm going to take the Cubs in this one.
I agree with you. I'm picking the Cubs. In fact, I believe David Ross was my manager of the year prediction. It might have been him or Davey Martinez. I'm not sure, but I think Ross has done a great job managing that Cubs uh, ball club. I mean, you look at it, that clubhouse. You know, the Cubs had the talent the last couple of years, but it just seemed like something was off with Joe Madden. I think the fact that maybe the World Series fatigue had gotten to the team. So you bring in a guy like David Ross, who of course played with the stars like Rizzo and Chris Bryant, and he's been able to do a good job. I agree with you. I'm picking the Chicago Cubs to defeat the Marlins, but give a lot of credit to the Marlins, regardless of how the season ends for them. I mean, the fact that they were able to even make the playoffs after everything they went through to start the season is pretty remarkable. But I will take the Cubs. So 3 for 3. Unfortunately, there's not much disagreement in this wild card series. But let's now look to the last series. You've got the Braves and the Reds.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the Braves this year, they have, I think, arguably the best offense in baseball, potentially. Freddie Freeman, Acuna, Marcell Ozuna has been a great transaction pickup for them this year. But you also look at them, and they really have no starting pitch, and they've had to go out at free agency, try to get some guys like Tommy Milone. He hasn't been good. You have a bunch of guys that got injured throughout the year. They started a bunch of younger guys. Max Fried has kind of been the one stable guy in their rotation that's kind of propelled them forward a little bit. And then you look on the other side at Cincinnati. They were kind of my surprise team going into this year, and a lot of people's surprise team, and they do make the playoffs. Trevor Bauer had a Cy Young type season as the ace of their staff. Luis Castillo, another guy I really like. So with all of that being said, and my kind of assertion that pitching matters more in baseball, I am going to take the Cincinnati Reds.
Wow.
To beat the Atlanta Braves, since it's just the best of 3 series, and I think the pitching matters more in these games, especially with just the 2 wins needed to advance.
Remember that game last year? I mean, The Braves were probably favored right along with the Dodgers to make it out of the National League, and then they played Game 5 against the Cardinals where they gave up like 10 runs in the first inning.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be on the mind of the Braves players when they start the series. I'm going to go with the Braves simply because I think they're probably if right up there. You could argue even more so than the Yankees, right? They're right up there with the Dodgers in terms of pressure to win. I mean, you look at the talent this team has. It would be kind of inexcusable if the Braves are not, at the very least, competing for a World Series right there at the end in the NLCS. I'm going with the Braves to beat the Reds just with their talent, playoff experience. I think that they're motivated to regroup from what happened last year. So you look at, again, a recap of the wild card round, only 2 disagreements overall, one in each league. In the National League, I have Atlanta, and Cory has Cincinnati. So now let's move on to the divisional series. Based off our picks, we have Tampa and New York, a AL East matchup in the first AL divisional series round.
And what a matchup that would be if this does come out to pass too. Contrasting styles of play, really. The Rays like to manufacture their runs. The Yankees are all about the long ball. But, I mean, I picked the Rays. I can't go against them now. I'm going to pick the Tampa Bay Rays to advance in that one. Blake Snell kind of anchoring that rotation. Other guys like Charlie Morton and Tyler Glasnow will, I think, shut down those big Yankee bats.
Again, a great series. Hopefully, if it comes to pass, I am going with the Yankees. Again, they were my AL pick in the World to make the World Series. I can't go against them now, but Tampa will be a formidable match for sure. And again, the fact that they're division opponents, I mean, they have added levels of familiarity with each other because they play so often during the regular season. But I'll go with the Yankees there. So in this division series, Cory, you had Minnesota and the White Sox. I have Houston and the White Sox. So, again, it's different. We're predicting a different matchup, but based on your potential matchup, who do you think is going to advance?
Yeah, so this would be a battle of the AL Central teams, or 2 of the AL Central teams, I guess, that are in the playoffs, Twins versus White Sox. I'm going to take the Twins in that one. I just think they've been in the playoffs more. Their guys kind of know what it takes more. Like I said, I really love that White Sox team with Tim Anderson and Abreu and guys like that. But I think going forward, you look at all that the Twins have, I can't not take them to beat the White Sox in advance.
And I am going with the Houston Astros to upset the Chicago White Sox. How about this? Think about everything that's happened in 2020. How crazy would it be to have the Astros, after everything that's happened to them, make it back to the ALCS? That was also my prediction before the season started. And I just think, again, Dusty Baker's a veteran manager. His players are going to be ready. They've been playing deep into October the last couple of years. I think that they have the experience ultimately to propel them against the White Sox. So I will take the Houston Astros to advance to the ALCS. Moving on to the National League, we'll get to the ALCS in a little bit, but we have the Dodgers and the Padres matchup of 2 NL West teams, so another divisional matchup. Cory, what are your thoughts on that potential series?
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe that the Padres won this season series against the Dodgers and really – gave them fits in a lot of those games, a lot of comeback wins and stuff like that off Kenley Jansen and different things along those lines. But I think just with it becoming playoff time with the Dodgers focusing, and I think it's hard to pick against them. I'm going to pick Los Angeles to advance in that one.
Yeah, Dodgers, I think, like I said, have the experience. Padres will use this playoff experience to help them in future years. But again, Dave Roberts did sign an extension, but I just think it's probably inexcusable at this point if the Dodgers don't win this year, considering their talent, considering how close they've been the last few years. We'll pick the Dodgers to defeat the Padres as well. In the National League, again, a different matchup because we predicted 2 different teams in the first round. But, Cory, you have another division matchup, NL Central, between the Cubs and the Reds. Who do you like in that potential series?
I am going with another upset pick. The Cincinnati Reds will advance past the Chicago Cubs and move on to the NLCS. I think that's more so even for me just not as much liking the Cubs or the Marlins and what either of them is about. I think whoever comes out of that Braves-Red series will advance to the NLCS. But, I mean, I picked the Reds, got to roll with them. Like I said, just their rotation is what I'm rolling on and banking on. And, they've had great additions this year like Castellanos, Moustakas in their lineup. So I got the Reds moving forward as the 7th seed to the NLCS.
I am going to go, as my matchup is the Braves and the Cubs. I will go with the Atlanta Braves to defeat the Chicago Cubs. I think, by the way, that would be a great matchup of two highly talented offensive teams. I mean, like you mentioned, the Braves with Acuna Jr. and Freeman, and the Cubs, they've got guys like Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Javi Baez who have had success in the postseason, won a World Series. But again, I think the Braves, talent-wise, are on a mission this year. They've got the talent to win it all. I'm going with the Braves to beat the Cubs. So in the National League, I have the Dodgers and the Braves. Corey has the Dodgers and the Reds. And then in the American League, I have the Astros and the Yankees, and Corey has the Rays and the Twins. So let's start with the American League first. Corey, you have the Rays and the Twins. Who do you think will advance out of that matchup?
Got to stick with my guns, Tampa Bay, baby.
And I will say that the Astros run ends this time. I will pick the Yankees to defeat the Astros. This is finally the year the Yankees are able to defeat Houston. You remember they've met up in the ALCS a couple times. They've not been able to get it done, but I think the addition of Garrett Cole, a solid pitcher, would face his former team theoretically in that series. I'm going with the Yankees to defeat the Astros. The Astros, quote-unquote, Cinderella run. I guess technically it's true because they're a 6 seed, would end there. So I have the Yankees advancing to the World Series. Corey has the Rays. We are sticking with our original picks to make it from the AL before the season started. In the NL, you had the Dodgers and the Reds. Who do you think will advance out of that matchup?
I mean, it would certainly be hard to pick against the Dodgers in this, but I'm still picking the Dodgers. Like I said, we haven't even talked about even really much of their lineup, but I mean, it's just stacked from top to bottom. There's not one easy out along that. Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, of course, headline it. But you also have guys like Justin Turner in there, who, has been a consistent force for that team. And then even their rotation as well. We always bank on playoff Kershaw and stuff like that and make fun of him, but he's not even the frontline guy anymore. It's Walker Buehler kind of headlining that staff. So I think the Dodgers are clearly the best team in the NL, and I think they proved it this postseason.
I have the Dodgers and the Braves. What an epic series that would be, a best of 7 between two Titans. But I will pick the Los Angeles Dodgers to advance to the World Series. I think the player under the most pressure, and I think it's kind of hard to quantify in baseball because it really is such a team game. But, I mean, Clayton Kershaw, with his career, to not have a World Series ring on his resume, I think is one of the biggest travesties in all of sports. And he's got to get it done, and his team's got to get it done this postseason. I believe they will get past the Braves because people forget this was also a matchup a few years ago. They played, I believe, in the divisional series. Dodgers won that series in 4. But I think the Dodgers will ultimately end up advancing to the World Series. So how about that? We end up right where we started at the beginning of the season. Our predicted World Series matchups you had, Corey, at the beginning, Rays and Dodgers. I had Dodgers and Yankees. You initially, at the beginning of the season, picked the Rays. Will you stick with them to make your prediction right now?
Absolutely. I'm sticking with Tampa Bay Rays. Just everything that they have, I think they are a complete team that can get this done. I think obviously one of the more underrated parts of their team is that they're the bullpen that they have. They don't have any headline guys, but they'll put a number of guys out there that are throwing 97 to 100 with just wicked sliders and stuff like that. Closer Nick Anderson, even guys like Pete Fairbanks they'll throw out there. So I think, with this team moving forward, bullpen always becomes a huge part in the playoffs as well. A lot of guys that will kind of have a tighter leash on their starting pitchers, and I think the advantage that they have there will pay dividends. And the Tampa Bay Rays will walk away with their first World Series crown in franchise history.
Do you have a prediction in terms of how many games it'll take and potentially a World Series MVP?
I'll say in 7. Yeah, I think it'll go the full 7. And I'm going to say Brandon Lowe as World Series MVP. As a guy who's kind of floated under the radar a little bit, but put up great stats this year as their second baseman. Really 14 home runs. I'm looking up now, 14 home runs, 37 RBIs. A guy that, I had never heard of even really going into the year pretty much, and really had a standout year for the Rays. So I'll pick him as my MVP.
That's interesting. I have the Dodgers and the Yankees. Well, first of all, Corey sticks with his guns from early in the season. He will pick the Rays to beat the Dodgers in 7. On my side, I have the Dodgers and the Yankees. First of all, again, another series that would be such great for the historical perspective. I mean, first of all, we have LA and New York going off against each other. But think about, in baseball history, right? The Dodgers used to be in Brooklyn. The Yankees were always beating them. Dodgers eventually move out to Los Angeles, and they did end up meeting in the World Series. In fact, I'm trying to do the math. I can't do the math on the fly, but basically the Dodgers and the Yankees have met in the 1941, 47, 49, 52, 53, 55, 56, 63, 77, 78, and 81. So they've met close to 10 times, if not more than that, in the World Series. Again, for a historical perspective, it would be a great series. But I will pick the Los Angeles Dodgers to win the World Series this year. I just think this is their year to get it done. Again, they've been so close in previous years. Kind of been screwed over, if you want to be honest, by the cheating teams, right? Remember the Astros, that's the big year that they won the World Series and, of course, cheated in 2017. 2018 with Alex Cora, the Dodgers lose in 5. 2019, the Washington Nationals upset the Dodgers in the first round. And I just feel like this year it's now or never. And I think they will ultimately get it done with their offensive lineup, adding Mookie Betts into the fold. And again, like you mentioned, Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, two veteran guys that will be able to anchor that pitching staff. So I will go with the Dodgers in 7. I think that would be an epic series, especially facing those Yankee hitters. But I think ultimately Los Angeles gets it done. I will pick Mookie Betts to be the World Series MVP. I think that would be a great story, a guy who comes into LA in his first season and helps anchor that team to the World Series. So I'm going with the Dodgers. Corey's going with the Rays. We stuck with our original prediction from the beginning of the season. We had the same two teams end up making it, but ultimately Corey's going with the Rays. I am going with the Dodgers. Bottom line, it's going to be a epic MLB postseason. And Corey, I think regardless of whether or not our picks are right, we're going to have a lot of great storylines to talk about.
No, yeah, no doubt. With just even some of these matchups we're looking at, first round, obviously, and then potentially further down the line, a lot of intrigue that will be presented throughout this MLB playoffs.
A great discussion on the MLB. Again, we are excited to see what happens. The first games start today with Houston, Minnesota. It's going to be all the American League matchups, but you've got the Astros, Twins, White Sox, and A's, Blue Jays, and Rays, and the Yankees and Indians all playing today. Let's now move on to the NBA, because, again, we've just finished talking about a great MLB postseason, but lost in the fold potentially is the NBA playoffs. We are at the NBA Finals. I don't think we ever thought we would see a day where the NBA Finals, MLB playoffs, and the NFL season would all be happening at once. Of course, because of this pandemic, that happened to be the case. But, man, Corey, has it been an interesting playoffs. We have the Lakers and the Heat meeting up in the NBA Finals. But before we specifically get to talking about that finals, what's been your thoughts on the NBA playoffs? I mean, initially for me, I think it's been incredible to see the success of the bubble. I mean, I'm not even sure they really even had a positive test once everybody got to the bubble. We've seen some great teams like the Nuggets being able to come back from 2-3-1 series, the Bucks and the Clippers losing despite massive expectations to make a championship run, and a couple of other teams in there have had some interesting storylines. But Corey, what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far from the NBA playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, even better than I could have even expected. Just the intrigue that has been there, the highly contested matchups. It looks like these guys do actually really want to be there. It does still have that playoff feel, obviously. We would love to see, fans in the stands for some of these games and some of these moments that have happened. But it's amazing. These guys are still at the top of their game, at the top of their level, and it's provided a number of moments in these playoffs. Even just thinking back to that Boston Raptors series, Anunoby hits that corner shot for a game winner. You think about even just that first round too, where Murray and Mitchell are going off against each other, scoring 40, 50 a night, pretty much every night against one another. So there's been certainly no shortage of moments in these NBA playoffs, and we're now down to, I think, who have been, clearly the two best teams on each respective side. No arguments there about, a team kind of lucked by and made it. I think the Lakers and Heat have been the two best teams in these playoffs so far.
To me, the biggest disappointment is the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, here was a team, Kawhi Leonard goes there. They trade for Paul George. They had a really solid team around him, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and a bunch of other guys. And I think that I thought too. I thought they were the better team than the Lakers. I thought the Lakers had the two better players, but when you talk about a team advantage coach wise with Doc Rivers, I thought the Clippers were easily I shouldn't say easily, but I thought that they were clearly the better team. And then to be up 3-1 against the Nuggets and end up losing that series. I mean, the vivid memory I have from that game 7, Cory, is Paul George wide open three hitting the side of the backboard. I think that summed up what went wrong for the Clippers. And obviously now they fired Doc Rivers. I do think, I'm not trying to be a hater, but I do think LeBron lucked out a little bit by not facing the Clippers in the conference finals. I'm not saying the Lakers wouldn't have beat the Clippers, but I do think that we definitely missed out on a LA matchup. That's what we all wanted to see all year long, and unfortunately, we didn't get to see that. But props to the Nuggets, and then also, I mean, the Bucks. I don't know if I'm as surprised by it. I mean, certainly, I think look, the Bucks were the number one team in the Eastern Conference. You expected them to make a deep run, but I just thought that come playoff time, really, it was just Giannis and then a bunch of guys you couldn't rely on, and then I think the Heat were able to really take them out of their game. And I mean, the Heat do have Jimmy Butler, but they've got a lot of good guys around them, like Tyler Hero, like Bam Adebayo. I mean, really good role players, Goran Dragic around Jimmy Butler. And I think that, to me, it's not a surprise that they beat the Bucks. But what are your thoughts on, I guess, the two biggest disappointments, Clippers and Bucks, and how they faded out of the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing we just saw is that the Bucks, they might not be a team with Giannis and with the cast that they have around that's built for the playoffs. I think we saw a lot of, in the regular season, people don't want to get in the way of, a 7-foot guy coming down the middle of the lane with those moves that Giannis has. But in the playoffs, those guys are willing to just kind of make a wall pretty much around the basket, make him shoot the ball, make him kind of dish it out to his teammates. And we saw, his teammates kind of fail him a little bit. Giannis was still great in most of these games, except a couple times down the stretch. But, the Bucks just didn't look like they had a team that's really built for success once a team becomes completely focused on stopping Giannis. So I think, we could say, oh, how could the Heat have beat them? But I mean, once you really looked at that and kind of broke down what went on in that series, I don't think it was a big surprise. But on the other side, you mentioned just the disappointment with the Clippers. We all wanted that LA matchup. That was kind of what we were all kind of banking on this entire year, the Western Conference Finals to be that. But the Clippers, man, they just faded down the stretch. I mean, you looked that fourth quarter, they go in down, I think, 6 or 7 points, something like that, and they just couldn't hit any shots. They looked like they were nervous out there. They looked like they were kind of locking up even their bodies and stuff like that. So it was something, a fourth quarter where a team like that, where, I think they missed their first 9 or 10 shots of the quarter, and a game where you need your biggest players to step up. And, it certainly, I think, too, put a hit on, the Kawhi Leonard is the best player in the NBA people that have that kind of opinion. I don't think, after the performance that he had down the stretch in those games, you could really say that when you have a guy like LeBron that is still performing, year in and year out at his age. It was a tough series for Leonard. Obviously, he wasn't the main reason. I think you could pinpoint Paul George as the guy who was the biggest disappointment, but obviously you expected Leonard to step up a little more as well.
Where I want to get your thoughts on some of these other teams before we move on to the NBA Finals. Maybe potentially hot takes, depending on what you think of what I'm about to say. Well, first of all, really quick, I want to give a shout out to that Denver-Utah first-round series. I mean, how epic was that series with Jamal Murray going off against Donovan Mitchell, guys going for 50-point games? But my take is that I don't think Denver is a team to watch out for. That I don't know that they're necessarily going to be on the rise in the next couple of years. You look at next season in the Western Conference, you're going to have the Lakers again. You're going to have the Clippers presumably be in the mix. You're going to have the Warriors back and healthy with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. So, I mean, I think automatically you're looking at Denver potentially being a 4 or 5 seed. So I'm not as big on Denver moving forward in the future. I think Houston has effectively proven that small ball system with those players, Harden and Westbrook, cannot win a championship unless they add some sort of another big name player to help them out. And I also think that the Sixers are going to have a lot to do, but I'm big on the Mavericks. I think that Luka Doncic proved he was a star. Really, honestly, they could have won that series. I mean, the Clippers barely eked that one out. But I really like what the Mavericks are made up of with Doncic and Porzingis, and I think they're going to be a team to watch out for in these next couple of years. But what's your takes on any differing takes? Any thoughts on any of those teams?
Nah, I think. Wait, what was the second one you said again?
Just in terms of
You said the Nuggets you didn't agree with, and you said then
the Rockets.
Rockets. Yeah. So I think I agree with two of three of your takes. I think the Rockets, yes, that take is correct. They didn't prove that their small ball capable lineup is going to win them a championship. I do disagree though with your Nuggets take. I think they'll be around for a time to come. I think you look at Jokic. He was a name that a lot of people heard about. You hear about the Joker, but we don't get to see him as much. I think he was really on full display. And then, obviously Jamal Murray becomes a top superstar. Just obviously, I think the biggest clutch time player that we saw throughout the NBA bubble, even just as a whole. You looked at him and just all that Jamal Murray did. And so that's the one I disagree with. I also do agree with you on the Mavericks, though. I think Doncic is a budding superstar in the league, becoming, I think in a couple of years he'll be a top 5 player in this game. So if they can get, Porzingis is a good player, but if they can really get another sidekick along with him, I think that Mavericks team is going to be dangerous for years to come.
For sure. We will see what happens with the future of the NBA. But let's now talk about the NBA Finals. What an epic matchup this is between the Lakers and the Heat. Two warm city teams, but regardless, still playing in the bubble. But you have LeBron James facing his former team, his former coach, his former organization. LeBron versus Spoelstra, LeBron versus Pat Riley. You look at the road both of these teams had to get here really pretty easily, Corey. You look at the Lakers. They had a gentleman's sweep, as they say, in all of their rounds in the Western Conference. Beat the Blazers and Dame Lillard in 5. They beat the Rockets, James Harden and Westbrook in 5. They beat the Nuggets in 5. And you look at the Heat, they also pretty easily made it to the NBA Finals. They swept the Pacers in the first round. They upset, if you call it that, me and you agree, we don't think it was, but they beat the Bucks in 5 games. They beat the Celtics in 6 games, but the 2 games the Celtics won, the Heat were pretty competitive in those games. And you look at the season series, the Lakers won both of the games, but again, you can take that with a grain of salt in the season, given how it's suspended and everything. But bottom line, a lot of great storylines. You've got LeBron versus former team. Game 1 is Wednesday night. Well, what's your thoughts on this NBA Finals? I think it's great to see 2 teams that haven't been there in a while make it after seeing the Warriors for 4 years, after seeing even going back to LeBron and the Heat. It seemed like we had some of these same team fatigue, but it's nice to see the Lakers back for the first time since 2010 and the Heat back for the first time since 2014.
Yeah, and it's really good to see even some of these stars of the NBA that have never played in a finals get there. Anthony Davis, obviously, of the Lakers, and then Jimmy Butler on the Heat. The 2 of them being able to get there and really kind of showcase. Obviously, the big storyline is LeBron. Will he get his 4th ring? Will he, carry this team to a playoff, through the playoffs and then to a championship after the loss of Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, and just that big storyline. So, there's certainly a lot of intrigue on those ends. The Heat, I think, have been, obviously one of the most impressive teams this year in the playoffs of the bubble. And just like you said, I think they have a complete team with all the role players surrounding Jimmy Butler. So those are some of the storylines I'm looking at. But, it does ultimately come back to LeBron. What does he do? How does he carry this team? How does he perform? The media loves to spotlight him, and that's what is going to happen in this game. So it'll be interesting to see what Spoelstra kind of, draws up to stop him and limit him a little bit as his former coach, as a guy who knows LeBron well. So that'll kind of be an interesting kind of inner battle that I think we'll see throughout this series.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see who D Wade's going to root for, because he's got his franchise in the Miami Heat, but he's also got his best friend LeBron James playing on the other side. Corey, I'm going to make breaking news in this podcast. I am officially coming out with this hot take. My opinion: LeBron James is the greatest player of all time. I'm sorry, the stuff, and I've been reading up on some of the stuff that's been happening that people have been saying, and I think that especially in this LeBron MJ debate, this is something that LeBron James has now done for people who have not realized. He has now taken 5 different coaches to the NBA Finals. You think about it: Eric Spoelstra, Mike Brown, you have Ty Lue, you have David Blatt, and now you have Frank Vogel. With the exception of Eric Spoelstra, none of those guys are Hall of Fame coaches. I mean, what this guy has been able to do in now his 17th season, and I mean, you look at if you take LeBron out of the Lakers, I mean, they're a decent team, but I don't think anybody is picking them to make the NBA Finals. I mean, what this guy has been able to do now in the Western Conference, right? That was the knock on him for years. Oh, he's in the East, and I'm not disagreeing that the East was suspect, but the fact is he's been able to go to the West now and beat teams to make it to the NBA Finals. I'm sorry, I think he's the greatest player of all time. I'm going out on the limb, Corey. He is the greatest player of all time.
Did you not watch The Last Dance that we talked about on this podcast and all that went into that? I think this is just prisoner of the moment thinking for you. I'm still sticking to my guns. MJ is the GOAT, LeBron number 2. But certainly I mean, if LeBron wins, if the Lakers win this title, that will certainly be the debate that comes out and rehashes itself at the end of it, I'm sure.
So, yeah, we won't dive into a LeBron MJ discussion, but let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's predict the NBA Finals. Corey, Lakers, Heat, who do you got and how many games? And give me a NBA Finals MVP as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a series where, a lot of people look at this and say, the Lakers are the better team. They have the 2 superstars that are better than anyone on the Heat and stuff like that. We've obviously talked about the Heat and just the role players that they have. I am going to go out here and say that the Lakers will win this title, but I think it is also a lot more competitive than people think. I'm going to even say in 7 games, the Los Angeles Lakers win this title on the backs of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I think, the Heat, they have those pieces in place, but I think just when you look at the star power on that side, it's going to be tough to stop 2 guys like that for 4 games and to win 4 games in a series like this. But I do think it's a lot more competitive than some people may think. I think it does go the full 7. I'm going to say LeBron as MVP. I don't think you can – I mean, you could give an argument for Anthony Davis potentially, but with all that LeBron does for that team and does for like you've even said, just over the years, it's going to be hard to say that if the Lakers come back and, come back to glory in a sense and win this title, that you can't give that to LeBron. So I'll go with LeBron and the Lakers winning it in 7 over the Miami Heat.
Crazy. We have the exact same prediction. I am going with the Lakers in 7 games to beat the Heat. Point being, Lakers got LeBron James and the Heat don't. I mean, you look at the times LeBron's lost in the finals in recent memory. He lost to KD, Klay Thompson, and Steph. And then you look at 2014, he lost to Tim Duncan in a Hall of Fame Spurs organization. I mean, no offense, the Heat, great as they are organization, they got Jimmy Butler and these guys, great team, but nowhere near to the teams that LeBron has faced in the finals recently. He's got the experience. I think he ultimately will take the Lakers to the promised land. What a great story that would be again in a year where so much has happened, where we lost Kobe Bryant, to see the Lakers win the championship. I'm going with LeBron. He will lead his 3rd different team to an NBA Finals championship, and I will also predict that he will be the MVP. So I guess I'm a LA fan this postseason. I picked the Dodgers in the MLB. I'm picking the Lakers to win the NBA championship. I will not pick the Rams to win the Super Bowl, so I'm pumping the brakes on that. But NBA Finals, I think it's going to be a great Finals, Corey, and overall, I think just a great time to be a sports fan again. So much has happened during this pandemic, rightfully so. It's been a tough year for so many people, but I'm glad that at least now sports are not only back, but giving us some great storied headlines to talk about as they continue to unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said earlier, just like all these sports merging together at once, it's paradise for guys like me and you to just every night being able to flip on something. And there's certainly no shortage of games out there. We haven't even talked about college football as well, and that being back. The Hokies obviously had a great win on Saturday night. So like you said, there's something for every sports fan to watch out there. And this is really, a reprieve for us after being, having that void in our lives for so long where sports weren't around. For this to all be back at once is a great feeling and a great time for guys like me and you.
A great podcast we had today. We talked about so many different things happening in sports, the MLB playoffs, the NBA Finals, even got a GOAT discussion in there between LeBron and MJ. But nonetheless, as Corey said, a great time to be a sports fan. We are excited to see what unfolds. And, of course, with what unfolds with football, we didn't even talk about that with the NFL, with college football. Just overall, a lot of things coming together for sports, and we are very excited to watch all of it happen and unfold. So, again, for my podcast partner, Uncle Cornelius Michael, Cory Van Dyke, I am Hot Take Billy Parvatam on hand. We say so long to you for just a while. We'll see you next time. Have a great week, everybody, and enjoy sports being back.